The Bushwick Film Festival believes in the power of conscious filmmaking. We love stories that transform the way we think, disrupts the status quo, and creates awareness for social issues. So how can we use filmmaking as a tool to accomplish all of the above? Our guest today will tell us how he did it and why doing so is so essential, especially in today's political climate. What's up, Brooklyn? Welcome to the Bushwick Film Festival Indie Film Talk on Brooklyn Independent Media. I'm your host, Kwebe, festival founder and director. On today's show, we have filmmaker, writer, producer, and musician Khona Khasu here to tell us more about how and why he continues to use the medium to make a positive impact. Please join me in welcoming Khona Khasu to the show. Thank you for joining us, Khona.
Thank you, Kwebe.
So, as I said, you are a filmmaker, writer, producer, musician. Tell us a little bit about your journey as an artist and how you came from Liberia and now you're in Brooklyn.
Okay, my journey as an artist, my father is an artist. Mm-hmm. So I was born when my dad was in graduate school at Boston University. So I've been an artist my entire life.
Were you born in Boston or in Liberia?
I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
You were born in Boston?
Yes. Yes.
Khona, this is news to me, okay? I thought you were a Liberian boy.
I'm a Liberian.
Like myself. Well, it's okay, it's okay.
I've been outed.
All right. You've just been outed on Brick, okay? You were born in America, but you were raised in Liberia. 2
Liberian parents.
Yeah. And when did you go back home?
I went home as an infant. I went home as a kid. My father ran the National Cultural Troupe.
Okay.
And directed Liberia's first TV series in a studio very much like this one. Mm-hmm. So. And
how impactful, I mean, being an artist and director in Liberia, what year was that? Was that the 70s?
This was in the 70s.
And, you know, what type of support did artists have or filmmakers have back in those days?
They did not have very much support. I mean, your support was governmental. Mm-hmm. And if you were trying to write materials that were critical, then you were biting the proverbial hand. Mm-hmm. And it landed my father in jail at least one time. But, you know, he did some pivotal stuff and he had an influence on me, so. Mm-hmm.
And your, you know, basically your stories or your work is the same sort of, you know, conscious filmmaking, you know, you create stories that have impact that's pretty controversial. Did you get inspired by your father to do that?
Yeah, I guess so. Not in a deliberate way. I don't think he intended for me to follow, but you know, I played in a studio like this, under the tables and chairs running around. So the seed was planted, and then growing up here in the 80s, as a young man, there was certainly enough to sort of make you think more critically. And it's surprising that not much has changed, unfortunately.
Not much has changed in Liberia? Or
no, here.
Here,
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, the formative work, a lot of formative work was done here. You know, my sense of identity, the overlay, the external parts of it. So.
And when did you pick up a camera? When did you become a filmmaker?
I picked up a camera in film school. So at 24, you know, graduate film school.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to score. I wanted to write scores for my father's works, but at that time we were here and he wasn't actively working. So, you know, instead of going to law school, as most people would, you know, most young people want to do, I found my way to film school and followed my path.
And when did you realize how powerful the tool of filmmaking could be, and how, you know, when did you realize that you could actually use it to bring attention to, you know, critical political issues?
Oh, I mean, at 5. At 5, my father had a TV show in Liberia, 5, 6, 7, you know, that was quite popular and, you know, had characters that were symbolic of Liberian society at the time. So people would see us in the street and they would talk to my dad, and you know, they would almost preempt. They would want to know what would happen in the next week.
Okay.
You know, government officials would, you know, would stop him and say like, "Oh, that character." You know, and then there were a few who said, "Yeah, keep doing more of that." So I saw this as a kid, and that seed was planted. Flash forward to the '80s, watching Spike Lee's films. And that took it to a whole other level.
And how, you know, how did you feel that storytelling was impacting Liberian society back then, or even now?
Well, I think a lot of what writers were writing about at the time in the '70s were addressing the very issues that, you know, ended up disrupting society to the point, you know, that which we have today. I think the absence of strong Liberian writers, filmmakers, playwrights, you know, is impacting society quite negatively because we're fragmented when we don't have to be. We have enough cultural identity and history and our own parables and epic stories and songs which could be brought to bear, you know, like just like this society and country. You know, we take it for granted that Americans, you know, call on, you know, their societal myths to determine how they are to be, you know, as a people. And we could do the same thing, you know. And that's what my focus is right now.
No More Selections, We Want Elections is your first feature documentary about Liberia's first democratic elections since the coup in 1980. Let's take a look at the trailer and we can chat about it, you know, right after.
Okay.
I was small and used to go to the village, pulling came and all those things. Who thought I'd be president? I thought I'd be I'll be an English teacher. Every night then I used to like to play football, volleyball, all that kind of thing. If I want to win a game, I say, that's strong. I'm very glad that they respected me for my integrity. They respected me for my hard work. They respected me for the competence that I was able to muster.
Destruction of course in the country can play a major role into it.
You know, when I was small, I didn't sit down there and say I would be president.
At that time, I was not called to duty, and it was not my intention to be president of the country. I was and then the other. Let me finish.
No way, man. Today is payback time.
And listen to me, I'm your leader, you have to trust me. Do not, in the name of peace, go on the street and riot.
If you want to sing, sing. If you want to dance, dance. Because indeed, our day has come.
That was No More Selections, We Want Elections. Wow, that was a really powerful documentary. And to be there during the first democratic elections, what was the atmosphere like there? And like, you know, what was it like?
Well, I wasn't there to shoot that footage. That footage was shot by my father in his team.
Okay.
So, and then I edited and produced it. So we have shot footage for the second documentary, 2011. But for this particular one, I wasn't physically in country to shoot that footage.
What was it like for you during that time, though? Because I know 2005 was that 10 years ago, 9? I was pretty young at that time, and as a young Liberian, I did feel very empowered as a woman.
Yes.
I mean, how were you feeling around that time as a filmmaker?
Very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited. And looking forward to a time when we could be at home rebuilding Liberian society. So greatly excited. But even more excited about what the Liberian masses were saying themselves about what they wanted in their society. And I remain excited about what they have to say.
And why do you think that a documentary like this was important to shoot, edit, create?
I mean, we wanted to do one thing, my father and I, and the filmmakers who worked with us. We wanted to simply document this particular time in Liberian history for archival reasons, if only for those reasons, just so we would have a historical record, because during the war years, a lot of archival footage were destroyed. So that was a great success. But I think now that we're 10 years removed, that film actually stands as a measure as to what we've done well, what we could do better, and where we've, frankly failed, so.
Where do you think we failed?
Wow, you gonna ask me that?
Well, you said it.
I set it up.
That just hit me when you said it, so I was just like,
I think we've as a government we lost our way. We lost our way. It's not easy to rebuild infrastructure and society in 10 years. So I'm not saying that our government could have done magically. But I think some of the work that would have to do with rebuilding the identity infrastructure of the country, culture, the national fabric, the people's sense of self, sense of national pride, sense of ownership. I don't think we did a successful job at that, and I think we need to revisit.
Do you have any? Are there any young Liberian filmmakers that's seen this film or that's seen your work that aspire to create an impact like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do they just reach out to you after?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm in touch with a fairly significant group of Liberian filmmakers in New York, and I know a couple on the Eastern Seaboard. I know one who's in LA working. And then there's a handful of folks in Liberia itself, young filmmakers who, I collaborate, mentor with. And there are also guys, my contemporaries who we stay in touch as much as we can and try to, build for a day when we can do this.
Yeah.
So we're moving.
We are moving, aren't we?
Yes.
The Blamadan Center.
Yes.
In Liberia. Tell us about that center, and currently we or you hope for it to be the Lincoln Center of Liberia.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about the history, how was it donated, and how far are you guys in the plan?
Okay, well, Blamadan Center is named after my dad's theater troupe, in which he operated in Liberia in the 70s. I think started in 71. He was younger than me at the time. And it was a successful troupe. At the time, South Africans like Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, and other folks were in exile in Liberia. So they worked with the troupe. They wrote, choreographed, but they were also, Liberian dancers. Mang Bisse, the late Mang Bisse, who passed away some years ago, who were carrying on our own tradition. And then the TV stuff that they did. So they didn't just do stuff on stage, they started doing TV and actually started shooting 16mm film on location in Liberia.
Wow.
Okay, so the coup takes place in 1980. We flash forward to 14, 16 years of civil war, and you have the present day. And my father and I decided, after Madam Sirleaf came to office in 2005, well, now's the time to go back home and start our work, our family trade. And in the process of that, we collaborated with Marlene and Helene Cooper. Helene Cooper is a New York Times writer. She wrote the book House at Sugar Beach, which is a memoir of their life story. Well, those two sisters have donated their house, 22-room mansion, beach mansion, to be our physical location. Where we are at this time, we're in the early stages of raising monies to repair it. As you can imagine, it was damaged during the war in 1980. So we're in the early stages of pulling together a team and reclaiming it, refurbishing it, and setting up shop.
Is there going to be a production studio in there?
Absolutely.
Better be.
Yes. There has to be.
So, Kona directed a short film titled Hunting in America that focuses on police racial profiling. Before we talk about the film, let's take a look at a clip. Of Hunting in
License and registration.
Is there something wrong, officer?
You tell me.
Ben, will you just tell him?
It's okay.
Ben, just tell him who you are. Come on, honey.
Up that I should know?
Officer, my husband is an assistant.
He's not driving. You are.
I know.
No seatbelt.
I just took it off.
Now that's a violation, correct?
Officer, she took it off after you stopped us.
Really?
Yes.
It's true. When I
Yeah,
reached
after I stopped you for speed.
She had her seatbelt on the entire night.
Am I talking to you? Put your hands up on the dashboard where I can see him.
I was 4 months pregnant the night we were stopped. I didn't think we were going to make it.
Up and away.
Don't do this tonight.
Say hi, Mommy.
It seems so far away now. And life is what I always dreamed it to be. Except the stain of that night never goes away.
Be careful, man.
Hunting in America was 2001, right? You shot it in 2001?
Yes.
And it's a short film. September 11th, you just told me that you guys shot. You know, it's funny because my next question was, what are some challenges you guys faced while shooting this film? I could imagine you had to stop production during that day. No.
Yes, we did, because we were shooting in Boston, and the city shut down because two of those planes, originated in Boston. So we lost locations, and of course we were all in a frazzled state of mind, and it was quite detrimental to production because we were intending to make a feature film.
Oh, is that what made it a short film?
Yeah.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more of the challenges talking about police racial profiling, making a film about a topic that's so heavy.
Well, I started writing this script. The germ of this film came from an incident, where I was racially profiled my first year of film school.
In Boston?
In Boston, yeah. And stopped by a police officer. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and he asked me to get out. I couldn't because my car, only the passenger door worked. So I tried to explain to him, and he said, "Get out the car!" And he pulled the door. The handle came off in his hands. He fell on his behind, and I was just laughing. It's like, this is crazy. I'm serious. And then backup showed up, and the rest is history.
Did you get arrested?
Yes, I was.
Wow.
Yes, I was. My first arrest, and arrested and threats to do me bodily harm and all these kinds of things. So that idea sat in my spirit, and through my time in LA as a young writer. And at that time, there was a young black man called Timothy Thomas in Cleveland, I think. And he was killed after a stop. They stopped him for a seatbelt violation. And I just found it incredibly bothersome, to say the least. I don't have the words to describe how I felt as a 28, 27-year-old man, that you could die over a seatbelt violation. So I wrote a script, and I pitched it to a few people, and no one could see it. They said, well, you got to do something wrong. You know, the feeling at the time was you had to have committed a crime to be treated that way. And so it didn't take traction, and I decided I was going to come back to Boston and shoot it. Unfortunately, our first day was September 11th, 2001.
Speaking of police profiling or racial profiling, considering that this particular film is about that, how did you feel regarding the events in Ferguson, for example?
Well, you know, I'm almost 20 years older than when that happened. I think it's sad. I think it says a lot about this society, that issues that could have been resolved and should have been resolved remain. I think it's terrible that young men have to experience these things and to lose one's life. Very disturbing. I think America has to look a little bit more closely at itself. And I'm not taking sides. I'm 20 years past it. I've got gray hair. I'm pushing on, okay? It's too much for the humanity to have to watch your back like that. But I think it says something more about our general humanity as a people. Black, white, whatever, you know.
So, which brings me to the next topic, not topic, but question. Why do you feel the need to tell stories that deal with controversial issues like Ferguson, like police racial profiling, like elections?
You know, on the head, it seems like it's a story about racial profiling, but for me, it's a story about the human condition. It's a story about human beings and the choices we make in those microseconds where we can choose to see the humanity in each other, and when we can be our higher selves. And I'm not saying that this is possible in all circumstances, but for me, it's not really about racial profiling as much as it is a questioning of a society that purports to be the most democratic and the most civilized place. And you have scenarios where, you know, young men are summarily killed. You know, it's not one, it's not two, there were several in New York itself. So you have to wonder, you know, why is that? And if this happened in South Africa, what would you call it? You'd say, well, this is apartheid, right? So what do you call it when it happens here? I think.
So are your films posing questions and asking the audience to answer them within themselves, or?
Yeah, I'm not really interested in answering.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't have the answers. I said I'm 20 years past that, but I'm still a young man for people who are much more experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm only wrestling as any artist should with things that move me. And it could be something funny. And the idea of controversy, I don't know. It's something, I'm passionate about human beings. I'm passionate about fair play. I wouldn't even say justice. I would just say passionate about the good life, about being, our higher selves. So I try to write that way. So.
Yeah. So what would you say you're most proud of as a filmmaker?
I'm most proud of as a filmmaker. I'm very proud of the work my father and I did on No Selections, We Won Elections. And I'll tell you why. When we started to work on that film, it was at the height of excitement about Madam Sirleaf's government in Liberia. Pray the Devil, Back to Hell had been made. Iron Ladies had been made, and there was a lot of incredible press about the issues unfolding in Liberia. The good feelings. And what we wanted to do, we were approached by a big festival, big funder of films, and said, we'll give you money if you shape this story this way, if you tell the story of Africa's first woman president. And we said, well, that's already been done. It's been done twice. So we want to tell the story about the faceless, nameless Liberian masses. And so we didn't get the funding that we had expected, we had hoped, not expected. So we said for historical posterity's sake, we have to tell this story as it should be. And I think 9 years after, not even 10, 9 years after, with the situation unfolding in Liberia with Ebola and how it's revealed the situation in Liberia, the inequities and lacking. I think those other films that try to create a historical, an epic, heroic story about our leader, maybe they needed to have looked a little bit more critically at what they were doing. And again, I'm not saying that any one person can change a society in 10 years. I think if you're creating sort of a false propaganda, then you're running into problems. You're deferring the social changes that should take place.
Yeah, and that's, I think filmmaking definitely helps push social changes forward.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes. I'm going to ask you just 2 more questions.
Okay.
You worked or was a writer for hire for Will Smith.
Yes.
Why did you leave Hollywood?
I didn't plan to leave, and I hope I have not left forever. Even though it's been a long journey away. I was young, and I was headstrong, and I wanted to tell a certain kind of story that was not being told in Hollywood in 1995, 96, 97, 98. It caused me great frustration. So I wanted to come home to Boston and shoot. At this point, I've got a film on Burt Williams, the great vaudeville star, that I think would be a perfect vehicle for Will Smith. Maybe at some point I'll get it to them.
I'll give Will Smith a call. Before we go,
it'll win him his Oscar.
Before we go, can you offer some advice for novice filmmakers who also want to make a huge impact through storytelling, through filmmaking?
Know who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lifetime thing, but really figure out who you are and what your path is. There's no right way. I think commercial filmmaking is great. I watch those films myself. And if that's your path, follow that. Be the best you can be. But if it doesn't move you, then stick to your, stick to your beliefs. And it might be a harder road, but it could be a more fulfilling road. And I think that's most important. Learn your craft.
The hero's journey as a filmmaker. Khona, thank you so much for joining us on the show and for inspiring us to tell stories that really matter. Please tell us how we can stay in touch with you. If there's anyone, any filmmakers that want to stay in touch, how can we find you online? Sure.
I'm actually working on a Blamadan Center for the Arts website. It should be up in a few weeks. So you can look up Blamadan Center for the Arts. Certainly someone could reach you and get my phone number.
You guys know where to find me. So.
Or you could, my email, singwithkhona@gmail.
Okay.
My first two names @gmail.com.
Okay, hopefully we can put that text at the bottom.
If you can spell it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us again. Conscious Filmmaking, our guest Khona Khasu, and we'll see you shortly.